Chocolate 1200 Films Podcast, the Werewolf Special. I've never done a special like this before, so maybe it'll go well, maybe it won't. Maybe I'll do another one in the future, maybe I won't. We'll see. Basically, what I'm going to do for this special, I'm going to do 8 random werewolf films I have not seen before, and I will review them. And then at the end of the show, we will go over my top 10 werewolf films of all time, not counting the Twilight films. Of course, before we get started, the rating scale on the bottom: dumpster fire, garbage, and then can't quite recommend, okay if desperate, put it on the watch list, put it on top of the watch list. 1961, Curse of the Werewolf. Critic rating 50%, audience score 58, according to Rotten Tomatoes. I've not done this in a long time, but we're going to do a deep dive into this film. And I'm just going to do a deep dive of the first 15 minutes. So you don't need to skip over it. I'm not giving anything away. It's just setting up the movie. But so much happened in the first 15 minutes, it'll blow your mind. So here we go. So the movie starts with this bum walking into this kingdom. And he's like, I'm hungry. I need some food. Like, well, I can't help you. It's like, well, where's the king? Well, the king's way up top and way up top there, and he's having a feast. You can't bother him. Well, the bum's like, I'm starving. I need to go up there and ask him for food. So the bum climbs his way to the top of the castle here and just knocks on the door. And they open the door. It's like, hey, what do you want? Like, I'm a bum and I'm hungry. Like, well, we're having a big feast. And he closes the door on him. And the king was like, who's that? And the guy was like, some bum. Well, bring him in. So they bring in the bum. First thing, the room they're having this feast in this giant, gaudy, unbelievably huge castle. The room they're having the feast in is like no bigger than most people's kitchens. It's like 8 feet by 20, maybe. So the bum goes in front of the king and he's begging for food. So the king starts throwing food at him, laughing and chuckling. Stupid bum. And the bum's just like, okay, I'll take it. He's picking the food up off the floor and eating it. He's happy as could be. And then the king, for whatever reason, says, lock him up in the dungeon forever. So the guards take the bum and they put him in the dungeon where he will spend the rest of his life. And while down there, we get to meet the jailer and his young little tiny daughter, who's maybe 5. And then over the years, the jailer eventually dies, and then the daughter takes over for him, and she's the one that's feeding this bum that's in the dungeon. And she smiles at... She's mute, by the way. She's mute. And she smiles at him, and he smiles at her, and she's the only friendly face he ever sees. She's the only face he ever sees. And she brings him food and takes care of him, and fast forward about 20 years later, she grows up to be a beautiful woman, but still mute and still the jailer, I guess. And so the king makes a pass at her, like for some sexy time. And she says, no, I don't want to have sex with you. And the king at this point has some kind of leprosy, so he's looking really rough. Like really rough. So the king says, put her in the dungeon for the afternoon. So begging for food gets you in the dungeon for life, but turning the king down for sex, that gets you put in the dungeon for the afternoon. I'd hate to see what jaywalking is probably 10 years, but if you slander the king's name, week and a half. So the guards throw the woman into her own little jail, her own little dungeon with the bum, who's been there for 20, 30 years now. And what does the bum do as soon as she gets thrown in there? What does he do with the one person that's been taking care of him and smiling at him? And of course he rapes her. Wastes no time. And then what does he do after raping her? He croaks and dies, as one would, I guess. And of course she gets knocked up. A few hours later, after she gets, she's knocked up and she gets taken out of the dungeon. Then they take the bum off wherever and bury him. But now the woman is now pregnant. And somehow that has made a werewolf in her belly. So, these people, I guess she runs away. From what I remember, she runs away and his family takes her in and takes care of her. And then she has the baby. And then she dies in childbirth. And then this family, this rich family, I guess, or upper class, we'll say, then takes care of the baby. And the baby ends up being a werewolf and kills people, yada yada. That's all first 15 minutes. First 15 minutes. Unbelievable. That being said, the rest of the movie was pretty normal. It was pretty standard, but boy, that first 15, jeez. Overall, it was okay if desperate. It was just bizarre. Next one. 2000. Ginger Snaps. Critic rating 90%. Audience score 78. These two teenage girl sisters, and one ends up being a werewolf after an incident with a werewolf, and she's trying to hide it. And this movie's purely for teenage girls, and I can't really see anyone else that would enjoy this. Like young teenage girls, like 13, 12. So I can't quite recommend this one. A lot of people liked it. A lot of people had it top of their werewolf list. I said, not for me. Next, 2012, Werewolf the Beast Among Us. Critic rating 40%, audience score 37. Stephen Ray, popular British actor, popped up in this, as he will in another film later on. So this werewolf is going around killing people, so this troop of werewolf hunters kills them. But they only kill, like, werewolves that were bitten by the main wolf. And then now they're hunting the main wolf, where everything started from, and he's, I guess, big business. And Stephen Ray is like a doctor, and his little assistant, his little teenage assistant, wants to join the group that kill the werewolves, and there's a few twists in there. It's not bad. Okay if desperate. Just don't expect too much. Moving on. 2014. Bubba the Redneck Werewolf. There's no critic rating, but an audience score of 64. Unbelievably. Remarkably. Low budget werewolf film was actually pretty adorable. It was a horror comedy. The horror wasn't much, but it was actually kind of funny. It did make me chuckle several times. Bubba was just this redneck. The whole town's rednecks. But Bubba's kind of a loser redneck, so he's like bottom of the bottom, you know? And then he becomes a werewolf, after an incident. And then he becomes a badass. No one can mess with him. And the devil shows up. The literal devil. It starts causing problems. He makes people sign contracts and that screw them over. So it's Bubba the Redneck Werewolf versus the Devil. But yes, put it on the watch list. It's fine. Just fine. The next one I stumbled onto accidentally. Sometimes I like to have the Mystery Science Theater 3000 in the background as I'm going to sleep or if I'm reading a book. And it happened to have a movie come up called Werewolf. And the movie was called Werewolf, and it was from 1996. That movie, just by itself, got a 1.9 out of 10 on IMDb. So I decided I'm going to count this as one of my werewolf movies for this show. So I watched this, and boy, this movie is the worst thing I've seen in many years. This is real bad. These archaeologists dig up this werewolf skeleton, and they get in a fight. And one of them falls down and scrapes their arm on the skeleton. Seriously, and becomes a werewolf, and that's where the problems begin. And the Mystery Science Theater guys they're just sitting there making fun of this movie, and they supply a few chuckles, but this movie is so bad I still can't even with that I can't quite recommend. If you just watch that werewolf movie by itself, it's pure dumpster fire garbage. Nothing redeeming. So next, 1985, In the Company of Wolves. Critic rating 80%. Audience score 73. Another Stephen Ray movie, but this was 27 years prior to the Werewolf the Beast Among Us. So Stephen Ray is a very young man in this. This is basically a Red Riding Hood movie, but it takes about 45 minutes to get to that part. And by then, you've probably lost interest. This family out in the woods, they're having kids, and then the husband becomes a werewolf and disappears for years and years, then comes back, and at first he's like, he wants his wife to feed him, and then he attacks her. Weird. And then the young girl finds this guy. Whole lot of nothing. Whole lot of not much. Another one I can't quite recommend. It did have Angela Lansbury, who played an elderly grandmother, and she would tell the Red Riding Hood character girl in this story some stories, and that was kind of the highlight of this movie. Angela Lansbury still alive, still active, still working. She was old in 1985. Wow. Next one. 1988. My Mom's a Werewolf. No critic rating, audience score of 33. I got a little excited when it first started because this started as pure 80s cheese. Pure cheeseball fluff. I said, it's got potential. Horror comedy. That's what it's setting up to be. And everything just landed dead dud. This normal suburban wife who hates her husband because he won't touch her. She's out pet shopping, I guess. She needs a flea collar. And she finds this guy who acts more like a vampire. And they have a little sexy time. And he bites her on the toe, and she becomes a werewolf. It then starts all the hilarious scenarios of Mom being a werewolf with her hairy legs and yada yada. So bad. Nothing good about it. Zero. Dumpster fire garbage. Moving on. 2021 Werewolves Within. Critic rating 86, audience score 81. This was definitely the best of these newer werewolf movies I've found. Still wasn't that great, but it was this new ranger in this small little woodsy town shows up on his first day, and power goes out and the weather blocks off the town, and there's something attacking the generators so people can't use power and people are dying. People assume it's the werewolf of legend. It's a horror comedy, not all that funny, but entertaining enough. First hour was really good. Last half hour kind of dragged. Still, put it on the watch list. It's one of the better ones I've seen, I guess. But enough of that. Let's go on to our top 10. Top 10 werewolf films all time. Where is my award music? I guess I'll use my award music for this, because even though I'm not really handing out... Oh, there we go. I gotta have the fancy music for this. Top 10 werewolf films all time. Number 10, one I just covered, Bubba, the Redneck Werewolf. Not great, but good enough to get the top 10 for this list. Number 9, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, came out last year. Another horror comedy. It wasn't so funny, but still was interesting enough. Number 8, The Howling, the 80s classic. Although I think it's lost some steam over the years. Still worth a viewing. Number 7, Werewolves Within, which I also just covered from this year. Number 6, Bad Moon. Probably the best film Michael Pare ever did. Well, Streets of Fire was pretty good. And these were all 35 years ago. Not sure. Anyway, Bad Moon. Single mom, and she has a son and a dog, and they invite her. It's her brother or cousin or whatever the hell he was, Michael Pare, and he just got bitten by something over in the jungle, and now he's a werewolf and chains himself to a tree so he doesn't kill people. Nice little movie. Number 5, Silver Bullet, an old, I think it was the first Stephen King film to be adapted into a film. Fine little film. Number 4, The Wolf Man. Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. It was actually a remake of the original The Wolf Man from whenever, 1930, 1940. But it's 100 times better because you can actually see what's going on, because it's modern day film. Number 3, Wolfen. This was early 80s. This movie's so bizarre and so kind of shows nothing for about a good hour and 15 minutes. It's so kind of paced out, but it's so well made. Basically, these wolves have taken over the side of town that no one has gone to. All buildings are abandoned and crumbling, so these wolves have kind of just moved in and start picking off homeless people and whatever. So this cop and this investigator try to stop him. Fascinating. Number 2, An American Werewolf in London. Probably a lot of people's go-to number 1 staple. Still an excellent film. I think it's lost a little bit over the years also. It was 1981, so it's 40 years ago. But still a good enough watch. Keep you interested. Number 1. My number 1. Howl. From 2015. For wondering, critic rating 63%, audience score 38. Basically, this train going from wherever to wherever breaks down in the woodsy wilderness of wherever, and there's a werewolf. And whoever journeys outside gets visited by this werewolf. And then this werewolf decides it wants to come in. because that's where the people are. Very spooky. It does have a little bit of humor, which is hit and miss, but excellent film. Excellent film. Howl. Number 1. And that's it. That's all I got. That's my werewolf special. Hope you enjoyed. This was fun to put together. Maybe I'll do Frankenstein next year, or Dracula, or Loch Ness Monster. I don't know. So, until next time, bye-bye.